Good morning, everybody. I'm Donna, and I'm an alcoholic. I am so honored and privileged to be here this weekend. You know, I do get an opportunity to do this pretty frequently, but it has been a while since I have had more fun than I've had this weekend, and I just can't thank you enough for your hospitality and your generosity and for the way you've opened your hearts to me. Thank you very much for this weekend. It was so wonderful meeting Bonnie, and it's true, we did. We connected. I just feel with so many people that I've met this weekend that we should be members of the same home group, you know? I mean, we just belong together. And her beautiful family. I mean, it's a miracle of recovery to see the way Alcoholics Anonymous affects us and our families and our community. And what a privilege that is to bring that home for me this weekend. Thank you very, very much, and thank you, Susan, for inviting me to come. I pray this morning, I ask God always, when I am asked to do this, to help me to open my heart so that I can show you the love and the joy that I've gotten in Alcoholics Anonymous and the life that I have today that really, truly is beyond anything that I should have ever been able to hope for. And so that's my prayer this morning. And I want to share with you in a general way what it used to be like and what happened to me and what I'm like today. And I want to say, first off, if any of you read the program, you see that I'm from California. But that I have to give you a disclaimer, that's where I live now. That's not where I'm from. And I am a Montana girl. I grew up in Montana. I did my drinking in sleazy little cowboy bars, and I'm a sleazy little drunk. I grew up in an alcoholic home, and there's a little thing I would like to share with you this morning, first off, about that experience. I was the oldest of 4 children, and my father was the alcoholic in our family, and he was a man that was driven by 1,000 forms of fear. And I was terrified of my dad most of my life. You know, I am the kind of person that's I'm a coward, to tell you the truth. I'm not rebellious. I don't get in your face. I'm not defiant. My area of expertise is more on the manipulative side, you know. I learned to work it, you know, try to cut my losses and stay out of the way. But as a kid growing up in this home, I was just terrified. And, you know, I really made a huge mistake as a very young person. This is just kind of part of my nature, is that I really believed that the reason that things were happening in our home, the reason they were happening the way they were, was because there was something wrong with me. I thought it was about me. There was every kind of garden variety abuse that can occur in a home was happening in our house. And you know, one of the big gifts that I have gotten in my recovery is that I was taught early on that I should pay more attention to what kind of daughter I am to them rather than what kind of parents they were to me. And I can't even begin to tell you the far-reaching effect of that experience. You know, my dad, I was very afraid of him for a very long time. I mean, I was a big girl all grown up and still was afraid of my dad. And, you know, I was taught things like, when you talk to him, look at him. You know, treat him with respect as much as you are able. Look at him when you speak to him. Look at him when he speaks to you. You know, I made sure that I didn't miss a Father's Day, I didn't miss a birthday. Those tiny little steps, I began to focus more on what kind of daughter I could be to them than what kind of parents they had been to me. And you know, I heard a story in an AA meeting one time, they call it the Goonie bird or the loony bird or something like that. And it's a story about this bird that flies backwards in ever diminishing circles until it eventually flies right up its own butt. And I just think that that's a perfect description of the alcoholic, you know, if you ask me. I mean, that's what we do. We just fly backwards and backwards and backwards and boop, you're gone. Anyway, that's what I watched happen with my dad. And my dad was my greatest lesson in long-term, sober, untreated alcoholism. My dad hadn't had a drink in 25 years when he died this last January. And, you know, I have to tell you that my learning to behave differently did not change him. But there were some things that I learned. You know, first off, my dad suffered from a horrible amount of depression, and when we would speak, and he'd tell me, oh, you know, it's so terrible. My dad, the last couple of years of his life, would sit in his recliner every day and pray to die. And he couldn't see the love of the family around him. He couldn't see anything to be grateful for. And I used to try to talk him out of that, you know, which is really very annoying. They say it's like trying to teach a pig to sing. First of all, you can't, and then it annoys the pig. But, you know, what I used to do is try to get him to look at the bright side, or try to, you know, point out something to be grateful for, because that's what I do, right? And I just found out that that annoyed him. And what I learned in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous was how to listen to him and how to hear him. And instead of trying to talk him out of it, what I would say to him is, man, I bet that feels terrible, Dad. I'm just really sorry. It's so hard today. I just really hope maybe tomorrow will be better, you know? And I found out that when I could do that, when I could hear him and, you know, lend some kind of honor to his experience, even though I didn't agree with his experience, I don't know, it made him able to say more things to me. And it really repaired our relationship. And my dad died this January. And, you know, when he died, every member of our family was there, and we were standing around him. And we were loving him and supporting him. And I'll tell you what, I guarantee you that that wouldn't have happened in 1,000 years if I hadn't come into these rooms and begun to be able to see my dad as the person that he was, as the sick and damaged human being that he was, who was a victim of his own experiences. See, he doesn't have the benefits of recovery. He didn't know what to do with all those things that he had run from in his life. You know, he didn't have answers of how to work through or heal from the things that bothered him and the things that he had done. And it made me so very grateful that I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and that I have a way to live that allows me to be a different person than I was when I came to you. And so that is an important thing I wanted to share with you this morning. But as a kid growing up in this home, I was just absolutely full of terror. You know, I was just absolutely terrified. I didn't have one solution for living, one tool for living. And I was the oldest of 4 children, and I was considerably older than my siblings, and I was the caregiver in our family. I was kind of the mom and the dad. And when I was 17, I left home, and I met a man. And, you know, I've always been very particular about the people I married. I've married anyone that asked. And would you hand me that water? And thank you. I don't have to do that anymore. I'm very grateful for that. But I met a man, and he was stationed in Charleston, South Carolina in the Navy. And he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. And it was literally about, our entire courtship lasted about as long as it takes for me to tell you that. I knew him 3 weeks before we got married, and then we had 5 children in 6 years and 3 months. And I was busy. I had stuff to do, you know. I had not one idea about how to be a wife or a mother. And I had 5 beautiful children, 4 little girls and a boy. And I was just full of terror, you know. I was absolutely full of terror. I had not found a solution for living. And I needed one very badly. There's a little story that I tell sometimes. This is what I call my snapshot. This will give you a picture about how equipped I was to be a wife and a mother in this family. When I was a kid growing up, we lived in Billings, Montana. And my mom used to buy her eggs from the guy that lived down the road that had a bunch of chickens. And so when the egg cartons were empty in our house, she didn't throw them away. You put them up on top of the fridge, and when she had 3 or 4, you know, she'd go down the road and buy the eggs, and you get the idea. Well, I didn't really put a lot of thought into this, but I'd been married. We're living in Charleston, South Carolina. I'd been married about 6 months, and I had this big old stack of egg cartons on top of the refrigerator. And one day my husband said to me, "Hey, what are you saving these for?" And I just went, "I don't know. That's where they go, you know." I mean, I'm serious. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember thinking, like I had never asked myself, do I want to model my life after my parents' life? Not really. And, do I know anybody that has any chickens? I mean, I wasn't thinking the plan through. I was just doing what I thought the grown-ups were supposed to do, without question. And that's about as equipped as I was to be a wife and a mother in this family. When I was 26 years old, my oldest child was 6, my youngest was 9 months old, and my husband left. By that time, we had moved back to Montana, and I went to work in the cowboy bars. And to tell you the truth, I don't know how I survived as long as I did until the age of 26 before I really began to drink. I suppose it was because I didn't want to be like my dad. I really did not want to be like him, so I didn't want to do what he did. But when I was 26, I went to work in these cowboy bars. And God bless you. And I want to tell you the truth, just as sure as I'm standing here this morning, that what I found when I began to drink on a regular basis was a power greater than myself that made life work for me for the first time. I had been trying to be good. I had been trying to do it right, play by all the rules, stay out of trouble for a long time. But when I started putting booze in me, I didn't have to be that scared little kid from Billings, Montana that didn't know what everybody else knew. I didn't have to have the history that I ran from. I could get some escape from me. There was a guy in Red Lodge, which is a small town about 65 miles from Billings. It's in the foot of the Beartooth Mountains. It's a beautiful little ski resort town. That's where I did most of my really bad drinking. Not that I didn't do bad drinking other places, but that was the heart of it. Anyway, there was this guy I used to get drunk with all the time, and he used to say, hey, let's get drunk and be somebody. And I always said, let's get drunk and be somebody else. And I remember saying that, and I remember thinking it was very clever. But the truth is, that is what makes me an alcoholic. That is exactly. Every person in this room has drank a different amount of time, or a different length of time, or a different way. But what makes me an alcoholic is that alcohol made me happy, joyous, and free for the first time in my life. Alcohol, it didn't make it go away, it just made it stop hurting. And there's a place in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that says many of us don't have to drink the length of time or take the amount that others do. And it says this is particularly true with women. It says that we often become the real thing and are gone beyond recall in a few short years. And that's what it used to be like for me. I was a person who had not one idea about how to live life, and I was absolutely surviving on fear. And when I put booze in me, it wasn't like with the first drink I knocked back that it was like, yeah, but I'll tell you, when I began to drink on a regular basis, I got relief from the things that I had run from as long as I could remember. And I was a person walking around earth with just a mountain of anger and guilt and fear and shame and self-loathing and secrets. And when I could put booze in me, it just sort of made those things fade to gray for a little while, and I could be somebody else. And, I guess I'm grateful that I found booze when I did, because I don't know if I would have survived very long. I was very suicidal. I was very self-destructive. I hated myself, and I hated my life. And I didn't believe there was any other way to change it, any way to change it. So here I was, 26 years old, almost 27 years old, and I had 5 little kids, and I went to work in the cowboy bars, and I got to tell you that I had fun drinking. I really had fun drinking. Anytime you get relief like I got relief, that was fun. But the reality of what I want to remember is the way I had to live as an alcoholic woman, and that's why it's important for me to tell this story. I was forever doing things I didn't want to do with people I didn't want to know. I was living in a way that I didn't believe, and it filled me with terror. I hated who I was even more. But booze was the only thing that would make those things go away too. And, my children are... Alcoholism, we have heard this weekend from wonderful Al-Anons and wonderful members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we all know that alcoholism is a disease that destroys the lives of people who don't even have it. And this was the case in my home. My kids were drugged through the disease of alcoholism with me, and they are grown today and have families of their own, and but I can still see the legacy of alcoholism, of living with active alcoholism as a child, that it has left on them. Now, my sponsor, whose name is Polly P., says, gives me wonderful direction when it comes to this, and thank God for her. Thank God for her. She tells me often that my children, the problems that they have may have my name on them. But she says today that their solution has their name on them. And that is not to say, you're on your own, get over it, ancient history, deal with it. That's not the point at all. The point is that they are allowed the integrity to live their lives as the people that they are, just as I was. I found the solutions that I found, and the ones that I found in the beginning I'm not happy about, but I still know that they were methods of survival. And today, because of a relationship with a God of my understanding, I have an element of recovery and sanity made available to me in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm grateful for that too. So see, I just have to let them do what they do. This last summer, I took a trip back to Montana with my kids, with all of them, all the kids, all the grandkids, we all went. And we're all thinking, oh, this is just going to be so much fun, we're going to have a blast, Well, let me tell you what, it was a stroll down memory lane that none of us really expected. And we got back there, and it wasn't too much fun. It was a lot of remembering exactly the way we lived. And my sponsor, we heard a lot of wonderful talk about the steps this weekend. One of the things I'd like to share with you is that my sponsor is very big on step 8 and 9. And she has been very specific with me about how to make amends. And she told me that amends are not apologies. She said, you may owe an apology, but that's not an amend. The word amend means to change. It's like drawing up an amendment to the Constitution. When they wrote our Constitution and then they made the amendments afterwards, they didn't say, well, this is all the stuff we've been doing wrong. They said, this isn't working and this is how we're going to make it today. And she said, you honor their experience and you listen to what they have to tell you and you ask them, what can I do to make this right? Well, this last summer when I was facing those girls, now they're grown, they're in their 20s and 30s now, and they were angry 14-year-olds all over again, and believe me, it was not fun. They were in my face, and I was amazed. I had no idea that was coming. But because of Alcoholics Anonymous, and because I believe in these steps, and I believe that these steps are my answer, what I could say to them is, there is not one thing I can do to change our history. Our history is going to forever remain the way it was. I will always regret that you lived that way, that I lived that way, and that those were your experiences. The only thing I can offer you is that my life is lived differently today. And if you are angry with me, that's okay. If you need to say things to me about that, that's okay. And I promise you, I won't give you any excuses about it. I will just listen to you. I will honor your experience. And, that to me is amends. I have learned to be able to take responsibility without taking the blame. And I'm so grateful for that. Because, see, it always converted to guilt for me. It always turned into this like, oh, my God, if I couldn't change it, how can I live with it? Well, AA has allowed me to grow up somewhat. And I have begun to realize that there is nothing I can do to change those things. But I can stand responsible, and I can honor your loss because of my actions. And, it was a really big experience for me. What happened for me is that, my drinking career was hideous, and it was quick. It was not painless. It was very painful. It was like throwing a match in a bucket of gasoline, it was ugly and it was on. And I was a blackout drinker and a bar drinker, and I want to tell you something, there's just nothing more annoying if you're a bar drinker than to have somebody come up and say to you, don't you remember what you did last night? I just hated that. It was never anything nice. It was always something humiliating, I can remember standing there saying, geez, I never even thought that about your husband. I don't know what to tell you, It was just not fun, it was really not fun, and it was mortifying to live that way. I hit the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time in February of 1981, and I was a long ways from taking my last drink. What I wanted was to feel better. It was interesting, I'm sponsoring a new lady right now, and she was she's new in the program, and we got together just the day before I came out here, and I was saying, well, what makes you, think you're an alcoholic? Well, she wasn't really sure. And you know what? I can respect that, because the last thing I wanted to be was an alcoholic. That would be bad news. I mean, as far as because that means I can't drink, and that's really not the answer I want. And so I said, well, what is it that you like about drinking? And she said, it makes me feel better. And I said, I understand. I understand. It made me feel better too. At any rate, I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I don't know, I made some big mistakes in here. One of them is that I went into my first meeting in Red Lodge, Montana, and there were like 6 people that were the core members of that group, and 3 of them were women. And they looked to me to be like, I don't know, about 100. I mean, they were old. And the real truth is they were probably about the age that I am now. But when I was 30 years old and cool, dying but cool, they looked old to me, and they were nice people. That's the other thing that I thought. I looked at these people and said, these are nice people. This was just one more church group to me. It was just one more bunch of people that were able to draw some kind of success together in their lives. And that had never happened for me, But these ladies were nice, and they were patient with me. They had their little hair done, and they matched and everything, and they're all together. And they had a light in their eyes, I have to tell you. And they didn't try to shove it down my throat. They did kind of bug me a lot, though. I bounced in and out of AA for almost 7 years, and those people in Red Lodge watched me do that, I used to come to meetings stoned. I knew better than to come here drunk. I was too cool to come here drunk. And I knew already from bartending that you can smell vodka. And so I didn't go for that one, but I would come into meetings stoned, and then I had to get home right away, because I had a thing to maintain here. And they used to just love to tease me. They'd say, gosh, Donna, we're going to get together this Saturday night after the meeting, and we're going to go over to Kate and Pat's house, and we're going to play Uno. Would you like to come? And I'd be like, oh, gee, I really wish I could, but I got something to do, And they played it all like they had, they didn't know. And they'd say, oh, okay, well, maybe next time, and they continue. I thought, Uno. I mean, how lame is that, I totally did not get it. I used to go to meetings in Billings, and I would hear people in AA say stuff that would just mortify me. There was this guy, he used to go to meetings all the time in Billings. He was this tall, skinny cowboy, always dressed in black, had a permanent hat rim around his hair. And he always had some kind of big wad of Copenhagen chew in his lip, and he talked kind of funny and had manure on his boots and the whole thing. And this guy used to say stuff that would just give me the creeps. He'd say things like, when it comes to pain and sobriety, sometimes you just have to be like the mule in the hailstorm. You just have to hunker down and take it. And I remember thinking, God, I was really hoping for more than that, It's just a little weak, if you ask me, And he was a guy that I heard say, he was the first one I ever heard say this. He said that when it came to drinking, he was like the tomcat making love to the skunk. He hadn't had all he wanted, but he had all he could stand. And I thought, man, where do you get these people, I did a few geographics in those days of trying to get sober, and at one period I went to Minneapolis. And I was staying with my brother, and I was going to AA meetings there, and, I got ready to leave Minneapolis to go back to Red Lodge, and everybody in this group knew that I was going to go get drunk. The only one who didn't know that was me. And I had all my little ducks in a row. I thought, I'm going to go back to Red Lodge. I got this job lined up, and I'm going to stay here, and I got it all worked out. And they knew exactly what I was going to do. I remember there was this cowboy. I don't know what it is about cowboys, but they kind of haunt me. And there was this cowboy there from Texas. His name was Mike. And he says, you know something? He said, when you come into Alcoholics Anonymous, he said, it's like having everybody walk by you and spit in your soup. He said, I know. He said, you can eat it anyway, but it'll never be the same. And I thought, ew, that is disgusting. I mean, I was like, whew, I did not get it. I missed the point completely. But, the truth is they had spit in my soup, and I kept trying to eat it, and it was not the same, It was a long time, many years later, before I remembered that guy and went, oh, I get it, Now I get it. If you're new and you don't understand what I just said, just keep coming back, because you'll get it. Anyway, I was just in and out of AA like a yo-yo, and what happened for me, has happened for so many of us. Alcohol was my answer. Alcohol was not my problem. Alcohol was the solution that I had. Alcohol was a power greater than me that made life work for me for the first time. Alcohol allowed me to be happy, joyous, and free, and it made it okay for me to live in Donna's skin, just one day at a time. And, when I'm the kind of drunk that I am, if you take the only answer I've got for living, the only solution I've got for living away from me, it is only a short period of time before the pain of staying sober outweighs the fear of getting drunk. And time again, I would go out and drink. And I didn't go out and drink to party. Early in my attempts at sobriety, I used to think that I was a social drinker because what I did in public. But there wasn't anything social about it. It was my solution for living. But at the end, it wasn't that way at all. It was I would get to where I just kind of felt like somebody had ripped all the skin off of me, and I couldn't stand the way I felt one more minute. And I would go out and get drunk tonight, and tomorrow I'll go back into AA and I'll really, really try. And if you're new here and this is your first go around, I want you to know that you don't have to do that. You do not have to do that. We really, truly do have solution for living. We have answers and tools that if you'll begin to apply these in your life, they will change the way you see yourself and the way you perceive life around you. But if this isn't your first go around and you feel like you can't make it in here, you stay. You just stay here, because I want to tell you I was in and out of AA for almost 7 years. And at the end of that 7 years, I had lost everything that mattered to me at all. I have never been a person who had anything in the way of things. I didn't have a lot of stuff. I didn't have houses. My career was a bartender at the Snag Bar in Red Lodge, Montana. I mean, it was not even a full rung up the ladder from being in the gutter, I didn't lose a career, I didn't lose money, I didn't lose stuff. What I lost was every shred of a desire to live, every bit of confidence that I might have ever had that there was goodness available in life. And of course, my children. My children are the most important people in the world to me. I adore them. I like who they are. They are good people. They are my children, and I love them that way, but I've always admired them. They're just neat. And, over the time that I drank, I eventually lost my kids. They went to visit their dad over Christmas one time, and they never came home. And, I was taught in the early days then that there were women who said to me, you need to tell yourself that your kids were the price of your sobriety. And believe me, I didn't want that to be the price. Every person that ever comes into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous or Al-Anon pays the ultimate price. And for each of us, it's different. For some of us, it might be the marriage. For some of us, it's the kids. For some of us, it's the career or the house or the business. For some of us, it's just the years that are bled out of our lives, the time that we'll never have to repeat. But whatever the ultimate price is, that's the price we pay. And not one bit less would be enough to make us desperate enough to do what we have to do here, desperate to open ourselves to a different way of living. And that's the way it was for me. My kids were gone, and I tried with all my might. I had already been trying for 5 years to get sober, but I tried those last 2 years with everything I had in me. I am a stubborn and I'm a pit bull of a woman. I get my teeth into something, I set a goal, and that's it. That's all I can see. And, it says in the big book that the most powerful desire to stop is of absolutely no avail. And that's what happened to me. I crossed that line. I did not have the ability to choose whether I would drink or not. And the minute I put alcohol in me, it's anybody's bet where I'm going to show up or what kind of shape I'm going to be in when I do. Everything in the world gets second place to my right to drink and use. There's a man that I love a lot in Long Beach. He just passed away a couple months ago. His name is Frank Honeycutt. And I heard Frank say many times that Alcoholics Anonymous is not a program for people who need it, and it's not a program for people who want it. It's a program for people who do it. And I want to tell you something, that I needed this a long time. I get chills when I say that because I know that that's true. That's my experience. I needed it a long time before I wanted it, and I wanted it desperately those last 2 years. And it wasn't until I began to do things that were completely contrary to my good thinking that I began to get any kind of benefit at all. And I want to share with you what happened for me. After my kids left, I was still in and out, and you know, I went to treatment at one point. I went to a treatment facility in Havre, Montana, which is just about 25 miles beyond any length, I'm telling you. It is like the frozen north. And this was in November. And I got out in December, and we had ice on the inside of the walls. I'm not lying. It was freezing up there. And I went to treatment, and I knew how hard 28 days was to get a hold of clean and sober, and I wanted to protect that with everything that I had. And I managed to string together 13 and a half months after I left that facility, armed with a lot of important information, and armed with a precious 28 days that I had never been able to get on my own of clean and sober. I managed to string that into 13 and a half months, and at the end of that time, I lost my dream. My whole goal, my entire reason for being sober was so that I could get my kids back, because I knew that was the only way I'd ever get them back was if I was sober. And I had moved in the middle of my sobriety and gone to Kona, Hawaii, and I went over there sober. And I managed to stay sober over there for about another 6 months. And I brought my oldest daughter over for her 16th birthday. Her birthday and my birthday are 1 day apart. So, you know, what kid? I mean, how perfect is that? I told you I am a pro at manipulation. I bring her over, come on over for your 16th birthday. You know, we do the whole island. We go everywhere. We buy everything. And at the end of these 10 days, I said, okay, baby, I'm ready to come home now. I got a bunch of money saved, and, you know, I'll come home, Trina, and you guys can move back in with me, and we'll be a family again. And she said, no, Mom, we don't want to live with you anymore. We want to live with Dad. And I lost my reason for staying sober. And, you know, I'm living in Kona, and she left, and it wasn't a week, and I was drunk. In Kona, they had this really annoying practice of saying, is there anyone here for their first, second, or third meeting since their last drink? And then everybody would look at me to see if I'm going to raise my hand today, you know. I have a friend who is sober now as long as I am. I got sober the 5th of May, 1987, finally. And she and I got sober at the same time. And CB would get drunk 1 week, and I'd get drunk the next. And, you know, we were the chronic golden slippers in the group. And I remember running into her one time and saying, you know, hey, I haven't seen you in a meeting for a few days. She goes, yeah, I know, I drank again. She said, I'm going to wait until the 4th day before I come back so I don't have to raise my hand. I'm like, no. It doesn't work like that. And I made her cop to her deal. And anyway, she and I get to celebrate our birthdays together often through the years. She's a dear friend. Anyway, I'm in Kona. I am miserable. I am angry. I knew people over there. Who is it? Cliff R. says that they tipped the United States and all the rotten nuts rolled to California. And they say that the really rotten ones floated over to Hawaii. And I knew people over there that didn't have 2 healthy brain cells left, and they were staying sober. And I'm not stupid, but I could not get the deal. You know, I could not get this deal. And it was all about I didn't have a single solution. You know, I did not know. I made a big mistake. I would come in here and try to be like you are, you know. I'd say what you say and do what you do. I'd read how it works, and I'd pour coffee, and I'd get drunk. And I did it over and over and over again, and I was just getting so angry. And living in Kona, I was in a meeting one night, and I was just about as raw as I could be. I was just putting as many days together as I could before I drank again, and I knew that I would drink again because I always had. And I was in this meeting, and there was this long-timer that was leading the meeting. His name was Frank S., and he was very annoying to me. He was one of those guys that just had no problem yanking your covers just without warning, you know. And he was always on me. He was always needling me. And at the end of this meeting, I think it was the combination of Frank and this intense rage that I had boiling that just kind of lit the match. And at the end of this meeting, he goes, well, is there anybody here that has a burning desire? You know, and he looks at me, and I go, yeah, you know what? I got a burning desire for you. I said, you people just make me sick. I said, you are always telling me that sober is better, and sober doesn't feel better to me. Man, I hate the way I feel. I hate this. I hate being here. I hate breathing in and out. I hate living. And, I don't know. I just kind of like, bleh, barfed on the meeting. And I guess I was thinking, just either throw me out of here or tell me what you're doing. But, I just couldn't stand it one more minute. And after I shut up, there was this kind of a weird silence fell over the room. They're probably going like, is she armed? Anyway, then somebody said, right on, Donna, keep coming back, And I just thought, these people are strange. And after the meeting, this guy came up to me. He had about a year. And he's not sober today, as a matter of fact, but he had about a year then. And I said to this guy, I said, I don't know why this program won't work for me, but it just won't work. And he said, well, how long has it been since you drank? And I said, 45 days. And that was just about every last second I could stand, And he said, well, what makes you think it isn't working? I'm like, well, did you miss the performance or what? I mean, I just told you why I think it isn't working. I hate this. You guys like each other. You're all hugging, kissing, happy, joyous, and free. You're all, how you doing? Never had it so good. You just make me want to gag. I just hate this. And he picked up the 12 and 12, and he opened it to the 7th step. And he showed me one line in there, and it says, in every case, pain had been the price of admission into a new life. And I want to tell you that it wasn't a giant relief. I mean, I wish it would have been just something washed over me, but it wasn't like that. All it did was buy me one more day. I thought, swell. I just bet if I scrape it all together, I'll have the price of admission, I was just so full of anger and pain. Anyway, I'll tell you what happened was I went to the meeting the next night and I met a lady that saved my life. And Alcoholics Anonymous is full of people like this. We have very, very incredible people in here. We have the ability in these rooms to touch each other's lives in ways that no other relationship can. I have been significantly changed by people that I met once. Things that I'll never forget that I heard them say, things that shed a light for me, that opened a door. And that's the way it was with this lady. Her name was Phyllis Cowman. She died a long time ago. And she was from Paso Robles, California. And this lady came in. She was the Saturday night speaker at our meeting. And she stood up at that podium, and the most wonderful thing, I mean, she was one of these ladies that just would walk into the room and just light up the room, She had this special light about her. She had a love for life. She loved alcoholics. She loved recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. She believed wholeheartedly in this program, and she loved drunks. And she didn't care if you were drunk or sober. She didn't care how bad you smelled. She didn't care if you were sleeping under the bridge or in a condominium, I mean, she just had this magic about her that was phenomenal. She had a special gift that you develop after you've been around here a while. At least this is a gift that I can recognize. And she had an ability to look around the room and pick out the sickest woman there and go right for her, And I remember that she came up and put her arm around me and she said, sweetheart, you just stay by me and everything's going to be okay. And I melted. I mean, I just melted. I just had been beat up so long, and when this lady said that to me, I just thought, oh my God, this is wonderful. She told her story that night, and she was 36 when she got sober, and I was 36 then. The thing that I related to the most, though, was that she talked about that mountain of anger and guilt and fear and shame and self-loathing and secrets. And I'm going to tell you what, when I heard her talk about that, I knew that this woman knew how I lived. I knew that she knew. And I wasn't afraid to tell her anything. She had been a sleazy little drunk, just like I was a sleazy little drunk. She wasn't going to be shocked about anything, She had done the deal. And but I just fell in love with her. I absolutely fell in love with her. And I remember listening to her and thinking, man, if there was just some way that I could not drink, maybe I could have something like that one day, And I spent every minute that I could with Phyllis. She was on the island for a month. She had just hit the island after her husband had died. He had died from a brain tumor. And he had died, and she had come over to Kona to spend a month with some friends over there in the program, and she was going to rest up. And she was an absolute hoot. This lady had the most twisted sense of humor, which I really liked. And she had colon cancer, and she just had this surgery and had the colostomy thing, And when she told her story, she said that she had the unique distinction of being a rare member of Alcoholics Anonymous who was no longer an asshole. And she also said that she was now a bag lady. But the funniest thing, I know everybody goes, ew. But the funniest thing was she goes, it's the most expensive thing I've ever worn, and I can't show anyone. I just thought she had the most marvelous way of looking at things, and just the laughter. I mean, she was just so bizarre. I just loved her. Really, irreverent, and I liked that. Anyway, I just spent every minute that I could with this lady, and we were on the beach one day, and I said, Phyllis, I probably need to do another 4th step, right? She said, no, honey, you just need to do a 1st step, that's all. And I said, man, I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, I know that I am an alcoholic. What do you mean when you say do a 1st step? And she told me that there's implied action in the 1st step of Alcoholics Anonymous. She says that it says that we are powerless over alcohol and that our lives are unmanageable. And she said the implied action there is that you need to find new management. She said you need to find a power greater than you are that will solve your problem. And I'm like, okay, that sounded easy. I said, what do I do? She said, well, tell me about your higher power. What kind of higher power do you have? So I started telling her about the churches I went to when I was a kid, That's what I thought I knew about God. And she stopped me. She interrupted me and she said, let me tell you something. She said, any God that you can understand will be too small for your needs. And I had never heard anything like that. She said, you've been trying to do this a long time and it's not working. She said, maybe you could just consider something else. And I said, like what? What else is there? And she said, well, let me tell you this. She said, when you lay down at night and you go to sleep, your lungs inflate and deflate all night long, your heart beats all night long, and there's nothing that you do before you go to bed that will make that happen. I said, all right. She said, when your time on this earth is up, there is nothing that you could do to add one more minute to your time on this planet. When your time is up, you're gone. And I said, okay. She said, well, that is a power greater than yourself. She said, that's something you didn't create, and it's something you can't control. And she said, if you wake up in the morning and you're breathing, then you are a spiritual being, and God loves you as if you were his only child. And I know that I did not know what that meant, and I probably have had a hard time keeping a bead on that through most of my sobriety, but I loved the way it sounded. I said, well, don't I need to know who God is? Aren't I supposed to know who I'm turning my life and my will over to? And she said, no. She said, it's none of your business who God is. She said, God knows who he is. If you talk to him, he'll answer you, And I said, well, like, what do I call him? And she plays it all straight-faced, She goes, well, you could call him God, I'm like, boy, you better slow down. This is getting tough. She said, listen, whatever the difference between a live body and a dead body is, that's a big deal. That's something you didn't create. It's something you can't keep here beyond its time. That is significant. That is a power greater than you. She said, if you ever wake up in the morning and you're not breathing, you won't be here, I mean, it made sense to me. It was like, okay. See, I had always been praying to some God out there somewhere that may or may not help me, depending on if I was good. That was my perception. That was my old idea. I thought to live a spiritual way of life, that meant I had to be good. And, I don't know how successful you are at that, but I can only be really, really good for just a little while. And then I'm going to be bad, I do. I say something I'm not supposed to say, do something I'm not supposed to do. And then once I've been bad, God's not going to help me. That was what I thought. And so I had been actually preventing any success for myself in this program. I didn't realize that. This door was locked to me. And what Phyllis said is, if you wake up and you're breathing, she said, your spirituality is a done deal. That's not something you have to create. That's something you need to accept. And I said, well, what do I do? And she said, when you're alone tonight, I want you to get on your knees and say this prayer. She said, you put it in your own words. Say it however you want to say it, but this is the idea you want to put out there. You want to say something like, God, I don't know who you are, and I don't know what you want from me. But if you want anything to do with what's left of my life, then come on, because I don't know where to go from here. You know, I remember thinking that was probably the most honest prayer I'd ever heard. You know, I was forever bargaining with God. You know, if you'll do this, I'll do that. I promise, 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 you know. And this was just plain throwing it out there, just saying, if you're there and you want to do the deal, then let's do the deal, you know. I went back into the meetings in Kona and I told everybody that I had a new higher power, and it was my breath. And they just said, that's nice, honey, keep coming back, you know. But I meant it, and I wasn't trying to be sarcastic about that, because this is what happened. When I would open my mouth and inhale to pray, I could feel the air on the back of my tongue, and it was the first time for me that I had ever gone within to find a place of peace, ever. I had always been praying to the God out there, the God up there, you know. And this made it within me. You know, if I wake up and I'm breathing, it's an interesting thing. I know a guy in the desert that's a former Catholic priest in Palm Springs area where I live, and he says in one of his talks, I heard him say that the word spiritual comes from the Latin word spiritus, and another form of that word is spirare, which means to breathe. It's the breath of life. It's inspiration, aspiration, all those are the same base word. Interesting also that the same word in Latin for liquor is spiritus. Isn't that amazing? I mean, when I say that I found a power greater than myself that made life work for me for the first time when I found booze, that's true. And what AA has given me is a power greater than that. AA has taken away the need to drink. In Hawaii, they call white people haoles. I found this out just a couple of years ago. It's like the Hawaiian slang name. It's not a derogatory necessarily, it's just the distinction. You know what that word means in Hawaiian? It means man without breath. Because when they saw the white people, they were so pale, they thought that they were dead. They thought they had no spirit. So they called them haoles, the man without breath. I just think that's amazing, the connection in the breathing, you know. Breathing is an essential part of all of the primary religions on earth. Breath is essential. Air is one thing that we can't live without. You know, we can live without food, we can live without water, we can live without love, but you can't live without air for more than just a very brief time. And, you know, God, as I understand him, has given this gift of life to me, and it still lives in here. And if the day comes when I leave this body, when my spirit leaves this body, the person that I know as me will no longer be here. You know, it's just where I used to live. It was sort of a thing that I could just kind of wrap my head around, you know. It was without the religious deal. She said, listen, I'm not asking you to decide what religion you're going to have or what philosophy you'll follow, if any. She said, I'm just saying, you just put those questions on the back burner. You address yourself to God and see what happens. And you know, that was the beginning of my sobriety. It has been a phenomenal journey. That was the 5th of May in 1987, and since then I've gone a lot of places and done a lot of things. I've made about every possible mistake you can make in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I haven't drank. And I haven't taken any pills or smoked anything, and I haven't had to do a whole lot of other things. I met a man in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we got married, and we had a fabulous AA marriage that lasted for 14 years. We were together for 15, and you know, there's been some events that have happened in my sobriety that have been difficult. And I want to share one part of these things with you this morning as I finish. 2 of my children have died since I've been sober. I tried very hard to reestablish my relationship with my kids, and that was very difficult. They really kind of wanted no part of me for a long time, and the women in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous told me that my children would be adults longer than they would be kids. And they said, you know, if you stay here and do what AA asks you to do, you're going to have what it takes to walk through that fear. And they said, if you don't stay here and you don't do what AA asks you to do and you drink again, you're going to blow a chance, and this could be your last chance. You can't afford that. And I was pretty convinced of that after my 30 times in and out of AA. And they also said, if you stay here and you stay sober and those kids never want to know you, you'll be sober and you're going to be able to help another woman's child. So I believed them, you know, and I just stayed here. But it was a point of surrender for me for many, many, many years. In January of 1995, my 19-year-old son was an alcoholic, and he had come to the rooms of AA, and he had done very much what I had done. He had poured coffee and read how it works, but he didn't have a single solution for living. And 1 month after his 19th birthday, he woke up one day and said, he had gotten loaded again, and he made it about 6 months, and he woke up one day and said, I can't live like this anymore, and I've been to AA, and it didn't work for me. And if you're in this room this morning, and you've ever had the thought that I just can't quite get what these people here have, don't listen to that thought, because without exception, we can recover in this program. But Daniel didn't know that, and he committed suicide that day. He took his life, and it put me in an area. I launched into a completely other dimension. I was sober in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was very, very angry. I was very disappointed in life. Don talked to us last night about the winter. It was a winter for sure. I felt, I guess, that I was being punished, but I'm pretty tenacious, and I fought back, and I managed to get a little bit better. In 2 years and 9 months after my son died, my second daughter died, and she was 5 years sober. She was an active woman in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. She was 25 years old, and she was just a beautiful, healthy young woman who got sick and died in 5 days. She got a virus, and it destroyed her heart, and there had only been 63 cases ever diagnosed in the whole world. And I want to share with you not so much those particular events, but what happened to me because of that. Those two experiences have been the most precious lessons of my life, because they were so painful and they were so costly. But I want to tell you that they have been the path by which I found a connection to a power greater than me that I just don't think would have been possible for somebody like me. After I lost Tracy, I just felt I was so angry. Here I am in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm speaking at conferences. I'm sponsoring women. I'm active woman in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I just felt so cheated. I just felt like this is not what I got sober for. I did not want my life to be like this. There's a guy in Long Beach also named Johnny H., and if you've ever heard him speak, one of the things that I've heard him say is that after you've been sober a while, sometimes you can begin to feel like you should be rewarded for having received this gift. And that was a trap that I was falling into. I was feeling like, where's mine? I was willing to be secretary of this and treasurer of that and talk at the meeting and bring the cookies and shake hands and pour coffee and read how it works. I was willing to do what you asked me to do, but it was for another purpose. It was because I wanted the kind of life that I wanted. And these were complete departures from that kind of life. When I lost those kids, it never occurred to me that I would that the opportunity to reinstate that relationship or to improve on that relationship would be removed from me. It was mortifying. And it was a time for me that I had to find God or die. I think that what Phyllis gave me when she gave me that prayer was sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. It was certainly a beginning. It allowed me to come to terms with the concept of a power greater than myself that I could live with. But at this point in my life, I really needed to make peace with God. I was in a meeting one night. I'm telling you, I was so angry. And I was so... The worst part was that I had this thing in the back of my mind that said, you are getting what you deserve. And that was horrible because I couldn't even say that. I couldn't say that to my sponsor. I couldn't say that in a meeting. And don't get me wrong, I did not think that God was killing my kids to mess with me. It wasn't like that at all. But there was this thing in the back of my head that said, what makes you think you could have had a good life? Where did you get that idea from? When has life ever worked for you? You've been digging yourself out from underneath a pile of crap as long as you can remember. There was that, what's the use? And this is sober in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was in a meeting one night and I heard a man share about his childhood, and he had a childhood very much like mine. And something that he said just opened a door for me. What he said was that he had to realize that in his sobriety, he had had the idea that the only reason things like that would happen to a little boy was if he had deserved them. And when he said that, it was like, oh my God, that's the way I felt. I thought this must be what I deserve. I thought that the things that happened to me were an estimation of my value. I thought that that meant this is what I deserve. This is what I can expect out of life. And you know, I was driving home that night, and I know it's not going to sound like a big earth-shattering event to you, but it was a moment I hope I never forget, that I cherish very much. And I was driving home, and I turned a corner on my street, and the thought crossed my mind, you know what? Maybe I've been wrong about God, and maybe I've been wrong about me too. You know, they told me here that if I begin to practice these things, I will change the way I perceive myself and the way I perceive my surroundings. And that is exactly what's happened for me. And you know, my progress in Alcoholics Anonymous has been glacially slow. I do not claim to be a spiritual giant. Nothing could be farther from the truth. And if you were in my home group, you'd know that. And if you played golf with me yesterday, you'd know that. You know, what I am is a person who has been blessed with the gift of just desperation. I remember a lady saying when I was new to newcomers, she would say, I wish you desperation. And I remember thinking that that was a lousy thing to tell a newcomer, you know. But it has been the truth for me, because I have been desperate. I didn't know how I was going to stay alive. I didn't feel like drinking. I can't tell you that for one moment I had a desire to drink, because drinking would not have brought them back. And that was the only thing that was acceptable to me. I did have a moment about 3 weeks after Tracy died. My husband and I were walking into a meeting, and I said to him that night, I said, you know, if I wasn't an alcoholic, I'd get so drunk tonight I couldn't sit up. But it was not a desire to do that. It was just an awareness that oblivion looked good at that point. And my husband looked at me and said, yeah, you know what? I'm really glad that we're alcoholics. And I am too, you know. What my inability to go back and try to do any of that old stuff and try to make it work for me again has opened doors in my life that are phenomenal to me. I am not happy that those kids died. You know, my husband left about 2 years ago, and I had a marriage that I've been telling everybody that I had a marriage that I thought was made in heaven, and it just turns out that might not have been the exact location. Anyway, he left, and my dad died in January. I got sick in March. I mean, you know, life just happens. You know, what I know today is that these things are about life. This is about life. This is not about God messing with me. This is about life. And what I am given in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous is comfort, fellowship, and absolute, clear-cut, specific instructions on how to develop a life based on spiritual principles that I guarantee you, in my experience, will survive anything. You know, I am no big deal in AA. I am a sober woman staying sober one day at a time. The thing that is the most precious to me in my life is my sobriety. It is the only thing that I would never recreate for myself. Everything else has to be released. I had an experience shortly after my husband left. I was speaking in a conference, and this lady from Canada, a beautiful woman named Mari G., and she said that her prayer to God, she put her arms up like this, and she said, my prayer to God today is that he will take whatever he wants to take, and he will leave whatever he wants to leave. And she said, that can be a scary prayer, because God might figure you don't need very much. And I'm telling you, this was like after 2 of my children had died and my husband had left, and these were like my big dreams in life. You know, these were the things that were my big dreams. And I remember thinking, oh, I really wish I hadn't heard that, you know. Oh, I did not want to do that. You know, and I'm not kidding you that I went to my room that night after the meeting, and I was wrestling with this. I was thinking, I just don't see how I can say, God, you just take whatever you want to take and leave whatever you want to leave. I just was really not wanting anything more to go, you know. And somewhere in that evening it occurred to me that life has been happening to me for quite some time now, completely without my permission, you know? And it's like, where do I get this idea that if I say, okay, God, you know, and that if I don't say, okay, God, that he's going to leave me alone, you know? I mean, God doesn't do this stuff to us, you know? God is there to get us through life. Then I had the thought, man, you know, the only thing that I could lose, really truly, that would be complete disaster would be my sobriety, because that is my connection to God. That is a connection to a power greater than me, a new management that works for me. You know, and up until this point, I didn't have a life that was worth living before I found booze, you know, and drinking was not a life that was worth living. And so here I am. Then I love the way my brain works, is like, eat, you know, I just barely get. But anyway, one more thought, and the thought that I had was, you know what, Donna, you are the only person alive who can take that away from you. And it was a moment of peace that just came over me. It's like, oh my God, I'm safe. I'm safe. I am the only person who can take my gift of sobriety and give it back. And you know, people live, people die, marriages come and go. They told me when I was new that there isn't a person on earth that isn't going to leave you or die on you or divorce you. Really. I mean, ultimately, one of those three things is going to happen. The only person who's going to be there the moment you die is you. And we are the last ones that we form relationship with. You know, it's my responsibility today to live a life based on spiritual principles, and it is my joy. To this day, I want you to know, and I promise you I'm not just making this up, I am a woman that lives with a lot of peace and a lot of happiness. I feel absolutely cherished and treasured by my higher power. I have a life that is of purpose in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am blessed by friends I've had through the years and have the joy of reconnecting with, and new friends that I get to meet. My family, my AA family, gets enlarged every move I make. And I am truly blessed. You know, when I was drinking in those bars in Red Lodge and I wanted to be somebody else, today I promise you, I would rather be me than any person I know. I am completely overpaid. I came here this weekend. You might think it was to speak here Sunday morning. That was the premise God used. I want to tell you that what I came here for was to hear my friend John and to hear Don last night, because I heard something in both their talks that really helped me. I have been in a place of struggling. I have been in a place of, since I got sick, my marriage ended, the way I saw myself as a mother, the way my ability to make a living, all of those things have just kind of crumbled. And I've been going like, what's up? You know, where do I go from here? And the message that I keep getting is wait. And what John reminded me of, and I cried when I heard it, is that God loves me so much that I am going to talk to just the right person at just the right time with just the right information. And, you know, I have a mountain of reasons to believe that God loves me very, very dearly. I have a lot of reasons. I could give you lists of them, but it has not made the journey just yet. And when I left here Friday night, I was thinking, God, why don't I believe that you love me that much? Why do I have trouble believing that? I've expressed that to a lot of people this weekend, and there were a lot of people who said, yes, I'm just like that. That's the thought I have too. You know, so we're all in the process of this. We are all in the process. That is certainly something I want. Today I do feel cherished and treasured by my higher power, but I can still have fear that what happens next is not going to be of my liking. You know, I'm an alcoholic. I'm a woman. I'm a human being. And that's just who I am. You know, I'm no spiritual giant. And what I needed to hear from Don was the thing about the 4 years and the seasons. Because I'm 16 years sober today. And if you look at it the way he was talking to us, this is my 4th set of winter. And when he shared, you know, God isn't mad at me, and it's okay, nothing's wrong, I'm just in winter, I was thinking about this and I thought, wow, you know, I'm in winter. What's cool about Alcoholics Anonymous is that God can use us, whether we're in winter, whether we're in summer, whether we're in harvest, whether we're in spring. God uses us. We don't have to be well to be of significant value. And you know, I would rather be me than anyone I know today. I am so very blessed. I am so happy to have been here and shared your weekend. Thank you for everything you've done, all of you. Thank you for your service, and thank you for my sobriety.